The following organizations have provided funding for this Into the Outdoors television series.
I got 2 eyes to see the light. I got my ears to hear the night. I got my voice so I can sing. I got 2 arms to use like wings.
Come on, let's go. Wait until you see all the wildlife here. It's a bird watcher's paradise.
Oh yeah, especially with all the migratory birds that come through here each fall.
Uh-oh. Sounds like some of the waterfowl might leave this place in a cooler. I thought you said this place was a refuge.
Well, I thought it was too. Let's go check this out.
Grab your gear and let's explore as we discover the wild outdoors. Science, discovery is what we do. You can make our Earth a brighter, better place by joining us in this wide open space. Into the outdoors.
My motto is, if you want answers, you go to the expert.
So the first thing we discovered about Horicon Marsh is that part of it's managed by the Fish and Wildlife Service and is a national wildlife refuge for the protection of waterfowl. So there's no hunting there. Another part of the marsh, the state wildlife area, is managed by the Department of Natural Resources for multiple uses. That includes hunting. To better understand how hunting plays a role in all this, let's explore the history of hunting in North America. Native Americans were the first to harvest the abundant wildlife throughout the nation. But when waves of European settlers spread across the landscape, some began market hunting. This uncontrolled slaughter of wild game had devastating impacts on some wildlife populations. Take the American bison, for instance. Would you believe that when Lewis and Clark explored the West, an estimated 60 million bison roamed the plains? But the combination of market hunting and slaughter by the Army reduced the bison almost to the point of extinction by the late 1800s. Then there was the passenger pigeon. Once the most abundant bird in North America, they numbered in the billions and darkened the sky. It seemed impossible that unregulated market hunting could hurt a wildlife population that size, right? Ugh, wrong. Someone shot the last wild bird in 1901, and the sole survivor died in the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. From billions to extinction in less than 100 years. Who would have imagined?
So we want to make it clear that market hunting was something where it was a mass slaughter of wildlife throughout the year, any species. Nowadays, because of conservation, we have strict regulations on hunting seasons, and those seasons actually help us manage wildlife populations, so we never have anything like that happen again.
Hunting refuge, refuge hunting. It looks like you got conflicting uses there. How did you manage them both?
So the Horicon Marsh State Wildlife Area is managed for everyone to enjoy. Although we get a large part of our funding from hunters and trappers and folks that fish, but we've managed this property not only for the people that are out there recreationally, but also for the wildlife. Because if you manage for the wildlife and the habitat, then you are making sure that you are providing great things for any user that wants to be out there. Most people don't realize that hunters fund about $800 million every year towards conservation efforts across the country. So hunting really does 2 things. Number one, we get a lot of money from hunting, trapping, fishing licenses that helps pay for the management and the good work that we can do on wildlife areas. And that's not just for hunters and trappers and folks that are fishing, that's for everybody to enjoy. If you enjoy hiking or wildlife watching, birding, kayaking, and you're in a state wildlife area or a national wildlife refuge, that money does good things for all the wildlife. The other thing that hunting does is it helps us to manage populations that are out there. If we have excess muskrat populations on Horicon Marsh, for example, we use trappers to help us manage those populations. Same thing with deer in heavily areas. It helps us to regulate some of the deer that are doing damage to the landscape across the board.
So it sounds like hunters really help maintain biodiversity and healthy ecosystems.
Absolutely, they're super important to us. We as managers, we're trying to provide good habitat for everything out there, and hunters can really help us in those game species, making sure that those populations don't get out of control, or making sure that we're doing a good job of keeping those populations safe and steady so that we don't ever run into issues with extinct species again. So in fact, if you do a little bit of online research, you'll learn that deer, elk, and even black bear are on a 100-year high across the country. So let me ask you this question. Who wins when hunters and other people who enjoy being outside get involved with wildlife and habitat management?
Is it everybody?
Absolutely.
It's not just everybody, right? All the species on planet Earth benefit from what we do.
Don't go away. There's more Into the Outdoors.
Find more science smarts at intotheoutdoors.org.
And now back into the outdoors.
You wouldn't think they would get any nutrition from sticks.
Well, they don't get nutrition like they do from other things necessarily, but deer have evolved physiologically and behaviorally to put up with a winter like this. So they don't need as much food, they don't need the nutrition like they do in the summertime. So this is perfectly sufficient to get them through the winter.
How have deer populations changed over time?
At one point in the United States, deer were almost extinct. Much of that was due to unregulated hunting. European settlement caused deer populations to decrease in many areas because it was unregulated. But today we have very regulated hunting. We have specific seasons. You have to buy a hunting license to go. You can only go during a certain time of the year and take so many animals at a time. And because of that very tight regulation, deer are actually protected, well managed, and there's a surplus out there. Just like if you had cattle or a crop, there's a surplus that can be taken every year, and those animals reproduce and they replace those animals that have been taken out.
Wouldn't hunting make the population go down?
Hunters, yes, they do remove deer from the landscape, but at the same time, the hunting movement and the conservation movement in North America is really what saved deer from extermination. And our deer numbers are about as high right now in North America as they've ever been in history.
What would you say the biological carrying capacity would be in these woods here?
Carrying capacity in this part of the country, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 deer or so per square mile. All over North America, there are countless habitats that deer can live in, and all of them seem to have a little bit of a different carrying capacity.
I just saw a squirrel over there digging in the snow looking for nuts. Can deer impact other species?
Absolutely. Deer are really considered a keystone species on the landscape because they affect so many other creatures out there. White-tailed deer have actually pushed other species like mule deer out of their native habitat. Deer have a great impact on the habitat of a variety of animals. So, for example, when they overbrowse their habitat, they might be taking habitat away from ground nesting birds or shrub nesting birds. High deer populations might result in having a shortage of food for another species, or more importantly, a shortage of habitat for another species. Deer impact a very large number of plant species, especially small flowering type species that are actually endangered or threatened because of the impacts of white-tailed deer.
Sounds like managing these deer populations is a pretty big job. What kind of tools do you use?
We have several hundred people that work out in the field collecting data for us. Another really big component of what we do is we rely on hunters themselves to provide us a great deal of information through harvest and the age and the sex. And then we use that information through formulas It will kick out some estimates for us as to just how many deer are on the landscape. And from there, we work with the hunters again to provide harvest quotas and an annual opportunity for them to go out and manage that population through hunting.
I don't mind it, but my friends aren't really cool with hunting. What would happen if we stopped hunting?
Hunting is an important tool for us to manage deer numbers. We're not only managing the impacts that deer have on their own habitat, but we're, for the most part, managing the impacts that deer have on humans. How many deer are people willing to tolerate? So deer impact people in many, many ways. Every person out there that drives a car has the possibility of hitting an animal, and they cause a lot of damage to thousands and thousands of motorists a year, not only to their vehicles, but their human safety.
It kind of sounds like you're saying hunters are like ecosystem managers that you guys use.
Absolutely. Hunters play a critical role in wildlife management. One of the real benefits that hunters provide to all wildlife management is they buy a hunting license, and that money goes into managing a variety of animals, not just deer, but endangered species, forest habitats, water quality, fisheries, all sorts of things that money benefits all over the nation.
So people are trying to become more sustainable, and hunting seems like it could be a solution to that.
Well, we're certainly seeing more of it. We are getting more folks out there who are in their 20s and 30s that may have never hunted in the past, but they are starting to look at hunting as one way that they can provide for themselves. And then the most important part of that, actually getting that venison when they are successful in the field, how to handle it, how to prepare it to the table and enjoy it. Seen quite a few berries and things like that that would indicate that this is pretty good black bear habitat as well.
Wait, what?
Yeah, no kidding. Lots of bears are showing up in areas where they haven't been seen in 100 years.
I think we're gonna send somebody else on that assignment.
Don't go away. There's more Into the Outdoors.
There's tons more at intotheoutdoors.org.
And now back into the outdoors.
Man, those bear researchers are up ahead. But if we can catch up, I know that today our mission is going to be completed. We're going to be able to pull a bear out of a bear den. Come on! Bears are bears, so a word of caution here. Never go near a bear or a bear den. Bears are normally shy, reclusive animals that just want to be left alone. But they're also big, with teeth and claws. And like you and me, we try to defend ourselves if threatened. So observe bears from a distance and give them the respect they deserve. Since the bear openings are often small, they could use someone about my size to go in there and help pull them out. Come on, they gotta be kidding. That's not even funny, right? Looks like they didn't need me to pull them out after all. I was kind of looking forward to it, to be honest.
So today we were doing a black bear den check, and we previously collared this bear this summer, and then we were going back in her den to change out her collar and then collect measurements on her to assess winter condition as well as reproductive success. So the vials that you saw were blood samples, and we collect blood to assess stress and other winter conditions. Additionally, we took hair samples so we can genetically analyze them.
See the radio collars? Looks like they took off the old one and putting on a brand new one too. You know, sometimes I think my mom would like me to wear one of those.
So the collar actually will allow us to see the different locations of the bear. We can figure out where these bears are moving to, what habitat types they live in, and then we can also assess if they're making large migration patterns.
Bears are often referred to as a sign of a healthy ecosystem because they require large, relatively intact tracts of habitat for them to survive and even thrive in. So if you have a good, healthy bear population, most likely you have a healthy natural resources base.
tell me about this biological carrying capacity for bears. What exactly does that mean?
So a carrying capacity is a concept used to describe the maximum number of animals that can be supported by an ecosystem.
Then what's this cultural carrying capacity I keep hearing about?
So the cultural or social carrying capacity describes the number of animals that we as humans collectively allow to inhabit an area that we share with them.
Right now, we probably have more bears in North America than we did 20, 30 years ago. They can exceed the cultural carrying capacity, and they can also exceed the biological carrying capacity as far as their impact on their environment and other wildlife. Black bears are an important predator on whitetail fawns, and I've actually observed bears preying on fawns and killing them and eating them. When you add those number of fawns one bear takes up and multiply it times the number of all adult bears in an area, it adds up to a significant number. In the same token, if you have too many bears in an agricultural area where there's farmers growing corn and oats, they can cause a lot of damage, costing farmers thousands and thousands of dollars in damage.
To manage bears, we gather a good deal of data, especially off of the harvested segment. We build a population model off the age and sex data that we have that can help reconstruct the population that is still on the ground.
The state agency managing wildlife populations get input from beekeepers, from farmers, from hunters. So they try and balance all of this input and come up with a final recommendation for managing bear numbers.
We balance public safety with having a healthy bear population by tracking every bear complaint, and then we evaluate the number of tags we have in each area.
So what role does hunting play in managing bears, and how does it affect this biological carrying capacity?
Legally harvesting game animals is actually usually done below the carrying capacity of the animals, of the species in that area, because that's when the population experiences the most population growth, which allows for more animals to be harvested without negatively influencing the population.
I've been around bears for more than 50 years. They're a fascinating animal. They've fascinated me most of my life.
I just don't understand one thing. If you love bears and are fascinated by them, how can you still hunt them?
Because I understand the biology and life history of bears and the impact they have in society. Management is important. If you have too many bears, they can cause problems for people. So that's where hunting comes in.
Since black bears don't have any natural predators on the landscape, human beings are the only natural predator that we have. So by using a controlled hunt, that is a hunt with a very limited number of tags, that allows us to take the harvestable surplus off the population and keep the population from growing above the social carrying capacity, which is the level at which the public would become intolerant of having bears in the landscape. So hunters are a critical and important tool for us to keep the bear population within a healthy level.
Don't go away. There's more Into the Outdoors.
Visit intotheoutdoors.org for more videos.
And now back into the outdoors.
So far, we've explored the history of hunting in America and how the abuses of market hunting led to the managed hunting seasons and conservation programs that helped restore our wildlife populations. So it kind of makes you wonder how these modern hunters compare to their pioneer ancestors from long ago. Let's find out. So tell me about your most exciting hunt.
My most memorable hunt would probably be when I got my first deer, because I remember it was cold outside and I was supposed to go to the Christmas parade, and I fell asleep in the stand. But right when I woke up, we were about to leave when 3 deer came along and aiming at the one deer. It wasn't the biggest deer, but it was the closest one.
I remember that night because you came to the parade in camo.
Hunting to me has really opened up my eyes in nature, because now I can see the squirrels running up and down the trees, and I can hear the birds' calls, which I would have never noticed before just sitting inside.
That is so true. Without that, I would not know the difference between all the different trees, all the different types of bird and animal calls, and it's just so cool to see those deer, the bucks, chase the doe.
Yeah, I think this just helps you have that connection with nature. I've especially learned how loud squirrels can be, especially on crisp leaves and snow. They just always try to make a racket.
Hunting has been a lot of fun for our family and for the experience. It's not just about killing the animal, but being together, and it's nice to eat the venison.
Yeah, I agree, but for me, it's getting a chance to spend precious time in the field with these wonderful children that I'm able to be around.
Well, yeah, I get that part, but especially for me, going off by myself, sitting out there for 14 hours all alone, it's a good way just to kind of detach from society and get away from all my stress and problems and just enjoy being out in nature.
That's kind of the same for me. We were able to bond together on one certain thing instead of being our separate ways like we are most of the other times.
You know, I think hunting is so important both healthfully and psychologically because it's a connection to the outdoors. It's a connection, I think, to our primal self, our heritage, how we survived as a human race. And I love to be out there because it gives us an opportunity to be physical and relax and de-stress and just really enjoy the environment around you.
So, what do you tell family or friends when they ask you why you hunt?
Of course, not everybody hunts, and people will ask you why you do it, but I just tell them that it's for the fun of it, and you really have to be involved.
Well, also with my friends too, I have a lot of them that say, oh, you only like doing it because you get to kill animals, and that's not the reason. It's not just for the kill. It's the experience, what memories you gain from that, and all the skills life skills that you will learn from hunting.
I also agree with that, because whenever my friends ask me why I hunt, none of them do. I tell them that it's about the experience, and then I tell them the experience I have, and then some of them got more interested in hunting.
Everybody talks about how exciting the hunt is, but how much enjoyment we get out of that, processing everything so that we're able to eat that ourselves, and it's really rewarding that way.
Yep, I remember being only 4 years old going out there with a little butter knife, helping cut as much meat off the bone as I could, leaving nothing behind. It's just more rewarding, especially knowing that you are the person that is preparing your own meal. You're not going to the store to buy it, you are preparing it.
We know exactly where that comes from and how good that happens to taste each time.
I also find this memorable because I just remember how we have our friends and family, they all just come in and we start a fire in the wood stove in the garage, and we kind of all just sit around and drink pop and while we're still cutting up the deer and sharing stories from our day.
And personally, I think the meat that we harvest ourselves tastes better than just store-bought meat that we go and buy, because we know where ours comes from and you just get the reward of eating it yourself.
No doubt that they are way more healthy than anything that you can buy in any supermarket.
Sustainability is something that they really talk about a lot in schools and everything, and I think that hunting helps us to be able to kind of sustain ourselves and be more independent.
You know, there's an old saying that you don't know what you're missing until you've tried it, and our connection with nature has been wonderful as a family, and I would think that experience, people would want that all the time. You know, if you think about it, humans have been hunting for at least 250,000 years, and I think that that's something ingrained in us as human beings, and I think we definitely experience that together as a family.
Well, I don't know if it's a part of my DNA personally, but I have a countdown going on from the very first second opening day starts. I already have 364 days to the next opening season. I think the main reason I hunt is for the thrill, excitement, and the connection that I have with nature.
As I sat there listening to how hunting affects their lives, it got me thinking. My dad spends a lot of time with his golf buddies, and my mom says I spend too much time on my cell phone. So I wonder how my life might be different if our family took some of that time and went hunting together. Yeah, maybe I'll check some Learn to Hunt programs.
The following organizations have provided funding for this Into the Outdoors television series.